Why is my podcast episode name, number, and description so darn important? Hello, friend. Thanks for pressing play on this episode of the Brassy Broadcast. I'm Jen Eads. I'm a musician, a student of the creative universe, and a curious girl full of questions. I'm also the head broad in charge at the Brassy Broadcasting Company, where I partner with the creators, the doers, and the makers of the world to put them in the ears, heads, and hearts of new audiences with podcasts and other audio goodness. When you're ready and you want more in-depth one-to-one coaching on your podcast workflow, audio quality, or help just jumping some other podcasting hurdle, email me at Jen, Jen, at brassybroad.com to schedule a 1-hour podcasting strategy session. This 30 days in a row of podcasting has really inspired me, and I want to share that inspiration with you. When you schedule your 1-hour one-to-one with me before December 31st, 2017, you're going to get it at a discounted rate of $97. And you're also going to get all 30 of the brass tacks of podcasting wisdom that I've recorded in November, plus the episode transcriptions with the links to resources and sample templates. Now let's talk about why episode naming, numbering, and short descriptions are so darned important. But before we dive into it, here are a couple of disclaimers. Number one, this episode is based on my personal podcasting experience using Libsyn to host the Brassy Broadcast. Your experience may vary across podcast hosting companies and podcast listening apps. Number two, my show has been a hot mess of naming and numbering because I treat my RSS feed like a giant petri dish of podcast experimentation, and because I've shifted the direction of my show multiple times. Okay, now here's the deal with naming, numbering, and episode descriptions. My search experience has been less than stellar in most podcasting apps. The Apple Podcast app is my least favorite for doing keyword searches to find podcast or episodes on a particular subject or a person's name. I recently did a season of podcast on the Brassy Broadcast called The Great Yellowstone RV Adventure. When I search Apple Podcasts for Yellowstone and RV, there were only about 5 episodes that came up. Most of them were for my show, which is great, but there were so many more that came up when I did the same search in the Castbox podcast app, or even when I do a Google search for podcast about Yellowstone and RVs. Putting keywords in your episode titles, descriptions, and show notes are critical to showing up in searches of any kind. The good news is that search features are improving in podcasting apps, so make sure your episodes will show up in the searches by using strong keywords in your titles. Think of your podcast episode titles as headlines that will catch the attention of a potential listener. In most cases, a title of episode 1 is not going to make a potential listener press play. Give that person a reason to press play. Give them a clue about what the episode is about. Use your episode title to create intrigue or interest. Make the listener go, what is this? I need to check it out. If you interview guests on your show, include their name in the episode title so it will come up when people do a search on them. For example, the title of episode 67 of the Brassy Broadcast is Lisa Mitchell, How to Create Better Outcomes with Better Communication. I included my guest's name as well as the keyword communication and gave a potential listener a clue about what we were discussing on the episode and who was leading this discussion. Be sure to include keywords in your episode descriptions. I typically copy and paste part of my episode descriptions to use in my social media post when I promote an episode. Hashtag those keywords in your social media posts. Now let's talk about show and episode numbering. I was experimenting with AnyPod this week. AnyPod is a skill that you can activate on the Amazon Echo, or Alexa, just as we call it at my house. And it's a fantastic way to listen to podcasts because you can tell it to play a specific episode number of a podcast. You can even specify a season and a chapter or episode number. This is why it's so important that you assign episode numbers and seasons with episode numbers if you're doing individual seasons. The technology for podcast consumption is improving. Make it easier for your listeners. As I mentioned earlier, the Brassy broadcast is a bit of a hot mess when it comes to numbering because I had no idea I would end up podcasting in seasons when I started. I've got episodes numbered up into the 80s, and then I've switched to season 4, episode 1. Hosting with Libsyn makes it incredibly easy to specify seasons and episode numbers. I'm getting my numbering system under control now, but I still struggle with naming my podcast episodes. I've improved as I've put more thought into it, and the same will happen for you when you're intentional about naming and numbering your episodes. If you found even the smallest little nugget of wisdom in this episode, share it with a friend that needs to hear it. Don't be stingy. They'll think you are an absolute rock star for turning them on to this. Instagram is my jam. You can connect with me there to get the behind the scenes of where my podcasting and musical worlds collide. And they're all Instagram is my jam. You can connect with me there to get the behind the scenes of where my podcasting and musical worlds collide. And for my podcasting tutorials, subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can find me on YouTube at Jen, Jen, Eads, EDDS, Brassy. Thanks for listening. Now get out in the world and do some good.